The morning sun rose slowly over the small town, spreading a soft orange light over the hills of trash that surrounded the place many people avoided. But for one little girl, that dump was not a place to stay away from. It was where her life began every day. Her name was Lena. She was just 9 years old, small and thin, but strong for her age. Each morning she would tie her hair with a piece of cloth and grab an old rice sack. Her mother would walk beside her, carrying another bag. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and old garbage, but Lena didn't complain. This was her world, the only one she knew. They called it the mountain of waste. But for Lena and her mother, it was a mountain of hope. Inside those piles of trash there were things they could sell. Bottles, cans, bits of metal, or sometimes old clothes that could still be washed and used. Every piece they found meant a few coins, and every coin meant food for the day. It was not an easy life. The ground was soft and dirty under her bare feet, and sometimes she stepped on sharp pieces of glass or metal. Her mother often told her to be careful, but they couldn't afford shoes. Still, Lena kept moving. She knew every corner of the dump, every path where the garbage trucks unloaded, and she knew the best spots where she could find bottles before others came. But Lena wasn't like most of the other kids at the dump. When the work was done while the others played or rested, she searched for something different. Old books. She didn't know why she loved them so much, but whenever she found a torn book or a few pages, she would clean them with a cloth and keep them in a small plastic box at home. At night, after dinner, usually just rice with a bit of dried fish, Lena would take out her little collection of books and read under a small candle. Her mother didn't know how to read, but she liked to watch her daughter whisper the words slowly, sounding out each one with care. Sometimes the pages were missing, so Lena made up the rest of the story from her imagination. Her favorite book was one she found almost complete, a story about a girl who wanted to become a teacher. Lena didn't know what being a teacher really meant, but she imagined it was someone who knew everything and could help others learn too. She dreamed about that a lot, even though she never said it out loud. One afternoon, while searching through a new pile of trash, Lena found something strange. It was small, black, and flat on a broken tablet. The screen had a crack and it was covered in dirt. She wiped it with her sleeve and held it up to the light. It didn't turn on, of course, but to her it looked like magic. She had seen people in town using things like that before, pressing their fingers on the screen and seeing pictures move. "Put that down, Lena," her mother said gently. It's useless, but Lena couldn't let it go. "Maybe it can still work," she said, her eyes shining. Her mother shook her head. "We don't have money for those kinds of things." Still, Lena placed it carefully in her bag beside the bottles. When they finished their day and sold what they found, she kept the broken tablet instead of throwing it away. She didn't know what she would do with it, but she liked holding it. It made her dream again, about things she had never seen but somehow believed she could reach one day. That night, she asked her mother, "Do you think people like us can ever have something new, not just things others throw away?" Her mother looked at her for a long time before answering. "Maybe one day if we keep working hard." Lena nodded quietly, but in her heart she felt there had to be more than hard work. There had to be a way out, a door to something different. Days turned into weeks and the routine continued. The trucks came, dumped their loads, and people rushed to collect whatever they could. The dump was always busy. Old men digging for metal, children running around with bags, mothers calling their kids to stay close. Yet even in that noise and mess, Lena always looked for her books first. One day, a man wearing a volunteer shirt came to the dump with a group of helpers. They were giving food and water to the families who worked there. Most people just took the food and went back to work, but Lena stayed and watched them. She noticed how the man smiled kindly at the children and asked them questions. When he came near her, he saw the small plastic box she was holding. "What's that?" he asked. "My books," she said shyly. "I found them here." He looked surprised. "You read them?" She nodded. "A little. Some pages are missing." The man smiled and said softly, "You're a smart girl. You like learning?" Lena nodded again, her eyes bright. "Yes, I want to go to school one day." The man's smile faded a little. "You don't go now?" She shook her head. "No money." The man didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked at her mother, who was sorting bottles nearby. He walked over to speak with her, but Lena couldn't hear what they were saying. After a few minutes, he came back and handed Lena a small notebook and a pencil. "Here," he said. "You can start writing your own stories." Lena took them slowly as if they were made of gold. "Thank you," she whispered. That night she couldn't stop smiling. She opened the notebook carefully, touched the clean pages and smelled the paper. It was the first new thing she had ever owned. She started writing, and not perfectly, not fast, but with love. She wrote about her days at the dump, about the people she met, and about the girl in her favorite book who became a teacher. As weeks went by, the man, whose name was Thomas, visited the dump often. He worked for a local group that helped children get education. He always brought food, but what he really brought was hope. He noticed how eager Lena was to learn, and one day he told her mother about a program that could send Lena to school for free. Her mother hesitated. "We need her here." "She helps me work." "I understand," Thomas said kindly. "But if she studies, she could help you in a bigger way later. Give her that chance." Lena stood quietly, afraid to speak, her heart beating fast. She wanted her mother to say yes more than anything. That night they talked about it. Her mother looked tired, older than her years. "School is not easy, Lena," she said softly. "You'll have to wake early, and maybe we won't earn enough some days." "I'll still help you after school," Lena said quickly. "I promise." Her mother looked into her daughter's eyes and finally nodded. "Then we'll try." Lena hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. For the first time, she felt something changing, a new path opening in front of her. The next week, Thomas came back with a small uniform and a pair of shoes. Lena touched them gently, hardly believing they were hers. When she put them on, she felt different, as if she had become someone new. On her first day at school, she walked nervously beside Thomas. The other kids stared at her shoes, which were still too big, and her bag, which was an old sack made from cloth, but she held her head high. When the teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves, Lena's voice trembled. "My name is Lena," she said softly. "I'm happy to be here." The class clapped and the teacher smiled. From that day, her life began to change, and not in big, sudden ways, but little by little. Each morning, she woke up before sunrise, helped her mother at the dump for an hour, then ran to school. She listened carefully to every lesson, wrote notes even when her pencil was short, and asked questions that made her teachers notice her. Sometimes she came home with dirty shoes and tired eyes, but she always had a smile. Her mother started to see what Tomas meant, that maybe, through her daughter, something brighter could come from the life they had always known. At night, when Lena opened her notebook, she no longer wrote only about the dump. She wrote about her dreams, about building things, helping others, and maybe one day cleaning up the mountain of waste that had once been her world. She didn't know it yet, but the dump that gave her so little was also giving her something no one could see, her destiny. Lena's first few weeks at school were both exciting and hard. Everything felt new. The classroom with its bright posters, the sound of children laughing, and the smell of chalk dust in the air. She loved it all, but she also felt like she didn't belong. Many of her classmates came from families who had clean clothes, shiny shoes, and lunchboxes full of snacks. Lena didn't have any of those. Some kids whispered behind her back, calling her the dump girl. She pretended not to hear, but every word stayed with her. When lunchtime came, she sat under a small tree behind the classroom. While others opened sandwiches and juices, she took out a small plastic bag with rice and salt. It wasn't much, but she was grateful. Still, she sometimes wondered what it would feel like to be like the others, to not worry about smell, dirt, or where tomorrow's food would come from. One day, her teacher, a kind woman named Miss Clara, noticed her sitting alone. She walked over with a smile and said, "Lena, why don't you eat with the others?" Lena looked down and shrugged. "I'm fine here, ma'am." Miss Clara sat beside her. "You're doing very well in class. I can see you love to learn." Lena's face lit up. "Yes, ma'am. I like learning new things," Miss Clara nodded gently. "Then keep that fire in your heart. It will take you far." Those words stayed with Lena. She repeated them in her head many times as she walked home after school. Keep that fire in your heart. It sounded like a promise, a small piece of hope she could hold on to. When she reached the dump that evening, she saw her mother still working. The sun was going down, painting the piles of garbage in shades of red and gold. The sight was sad but strangely beautiful. "Mama!" Lena called out, running to her. Her mother smiled weakly. How was school, Anak? It was good. I learned about the planets today, she said, eyes wide with excitement. Did you know the Earth goes around the sun? Her mother laughed softly. You're already smarter than me. Lena hugged her tightly, the smell of sweat and smoke surrounding them both. One day, Mama, I'll make things better for us. You'll see. Her mother didn't answer right away. She just looked at her daughter, tears in her tired eyes. I already see it, my child, she whispered. From that day, Lena worked even harder, both in school and at the dump. Every morning before sunrise, she helped her mother collect bottles. Then she would wash her face with a bucket of cold water, put on her uniform, and walk to school. Her classmates still teased her sometimes, but she ignored them. She focused on her books, her teachers, and the dream that grew stronger every day. Months passed, and Lena began to surprise everyone. She became one of the top students in her class. Miss Clara often used her as an example of hard work and determination. Even the classmates who once made fun of her began to respect her. One afternoon, Miss Clara asked the class to write an essay about their dreams. Most children wrote about becoming doctors, police officers, or singers. But Lena wrote about something else. She wrote about the dump. She wrote about how she wanted to find ways to turn waste into something useful, how she dreamed of making her town clean and safe. She said that even trash had value if people learned how to use it right. When Miss Clara read her essay, she couldn't help but smile. You have a big heart, Lena, she said, handing the paper back. Never lose that. But life was not always kind. One rainy evening, Lena and her mother were caught in a storm while collecting bottles. The ground turned muddy and the wind blew hard. As they tried to find shelter, her mother slipped and hurt her leg. The pain was sharp and she couldn't walk properly. For weeks after that, her mother couldn't go to the dump. Lena had to do most of the work herself before and after school. She carried heavy bags, sorted bottles, and tried to make enough money to buy food and medicine. She was tired, but she never gave up. Every time she felt weak, she remembered what Miss Clara told her. Keep that fire in your heart. One day, Thomas, the volunteer who had helped her before, visited them again. He saw Lena working alone and asked what happened. My mother is sick, she said quietly. But I'll manage. Thomas frowned. You shouldn't be carrying all that. Let me talk to someone. The next week, he returned with a small group of helpers. They brought medicine for her mother and groceries for the week. But more importantly, Thomas gave Lena something that changed her life again. It was a small solar-powered light and a repaired tablet, the same one she had found at the dump months ago. I remembered you found this, Thomas said with a smile. We fixed it for you. It works now. Lena's eyes widened. Really? For me? Yes. I put some educational videos and reading apps in it. You can use it to learn after school. She couldn't believe it. She held the tablet as if it were a treasure. That night, for the first time, she didn't study under a candle. She used the solar light and watched videos on the small screen. It felt like the whole world had opened up inside that tiny device. She learned how to pronounce new English words, watched science lessons, and even listened to music. Her mother sat beside her, smiling, though she didn't understand most of what was happening on the screen. I told you that thing was magic, Lena said softly, remembering the day she found it. Her mother laughed. Maybe you were right. Days turned into months again, and Lena continued to grow, not just in school, but in her confidence. She started helping her classmates with lessons, explaining things in simple ways that even those who struggled could understand. Soon everyone began calling her Teacher Lena. Miss Clara noticed this too. You have a gift, Lena, she said one afternoon after class. You make people want to learn. Lena smiled shyly. Maybe one day I'll be a real teacher. You will, Miss Clara said firmly. I believe it. But just as life started to get better, trouble came again. One morning when Lena woke up, her mother was coughing badly. The sickness that started with her leg had spread, and she looked weaker each day. Lena begged her to see a doctor, but they didn't have enough money. She asked Tomas for help again, and he arranged for a clinic visit. The doctor said her mother needed rest and medicine. The NGO helped pay for it, but Lena knew her mother's health might never be the same. Still, she didn't stop hoping. Every day after school, she sat by her mother's side and told her about her lessons, about math problems, science projects, and the stories she read online. She wanted to make her smile, to keep her spirit alive. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the dump, her mother said, "You see that, Lena? All this garbage. Maybe one day, you'll be the one to change it." Lena looked out at the mountain of waste glowing under the orange sky. "I will, Mama," she said softly. "I promise." That night, she wrote in her notebook, "I want to turn waste into hope. I want to give other children a chance to learn, just like I did. Because even in the dirtiest place, something beautiful can grow." And as she wrote, she realized something. The dump that once felt like the end of her world was actually the beginning. It had given her strength, dreams, and now, purpose. The next few years passed slowly but filled with small miracles. Lena grew taller, her voice stronger, and her dreams bigger. School was no longer a strange place to her. It was home. She was no longer the dump girl. She had become the bright girl from the mountain. Every morning still began the same way. She woke up before dawn, helped her mother prepare simple food, and sometimes collected bottles for a little money. But now, she also carried something else with her, books, notebooks, and her repaired tablet wrapped carefully in cloth. Her teachers continued to notice her passion. Miss Clara often gave her extra reading materials, and Thomas brought her printed lessons whenever the tablet battery died or broke again. Lena loved studying under the soft light of their small solar lamp, even when the wind outside blew the smell of garbage into their home. At night, she sometimes stood outside and looked at the stars. She had learned their names: Jupiter, Saturn, Orion's belt, and she whispered them like old friends. One day, she told herself, "I'll reach for the sky too." But life at home was getting harder. Her mother's health was not improving. The doctor said her lungs were weak because of years spent breathing smoke and dust from the dump. Some days she couldn't even stand, so Lena took over more of the work. Despite this, her mother always smiled. "Study hard," she told Lena. "That's the only thing that can take you out of here." So Lena did. She poured her heart into learning. Her grades climbed higher each term, and by the time she was in her final year of primary school, she was at the top of her class. Her school decided to send her to a regional competition, a science fair where students could show projects that solved community problems. Lena had never left her town before. The idea of representing her school both excited and scared her. At first, she didn't know what to make. Other students talked about electricity, robotics, and technology, things she had only read about. She felt small beside them. But then, one evening, while walking through the dump, she noticed something familiar. Water leaking from the garbage piles into the ground, black and dirty, flowing toward a small stream. Children nearby were playing near that water. Some even washed their hands in it. That image stayed in her mind. That night she couldn't sleep. She thought about her mother, about sickness, about how everyone depended on dirty water because there was no other choice. And then she remembered something she once saw on her tablet. A video about how filters could clean water using charcoal, sand, and stones. The next morning, she went to her teacher. "Ma'am," she said with excitement, "I know what I want to make for the science fair." "What is it, Lena?" Miss Clara asked. "A water filter, made from trash." Her teacher blinked, surprised. "Trash?" "Yes, from bottles and sand and things we throw away. I want to show that garbage can save lives." Miss Clara smiled slowly. "That's an amazing idea. Let's work on it." And so they did. Lena spent days collecting clear bottles, bits of fabric, and small stones from the dump. She washed everything carefully, layer by layer, just like she saw in the video. Her mother watched from her bed, pride shining in her tired eyes. When the day of the science fair arrived, Lena was nervous but determined. She wore her best uniform, her shoes freshly cleaned, and carried her project in a small box. The other students had polished boards, colorful posters, and shiny gadgets. Lena had plastic bottles, sand, and a dream. But when she explained how her simple invention could turn dirty water into clean, drinkable water, using only things people threw away, the judges listened closely. She showed them the difference between the dark water she poured in and the clear water that came out. This could help communities like mine, she said softly, where people don't have clean water and can't afford expensive filters. Everything I used came from the dump. There was silence after she finished. Then one of the judges stood up and clapped. Others followed. By the end of the day, Lena's project won first place. She couldn't believe it. Her hands shook as she held the small medal they gave her. It wasn't made of gold, but to her it was worth more than anything in the world. When she returned home that evening, she ran to her mother. "Mama, I won! We did it!" Her mother hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you could, my child. I always knew." That night, Lena placed the medal beside her books and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. For her mother, for Thomas, for Miss Clara, for every piece of trash that somehow led her to that moment. News of her win spread quickly. The local paper wrote a small article about the girl who turned trash into treasure. People from nearby schools wanted to meet her. For the first time, Lena felt truly seen, not for where she came from, but for what she could become. The next few months were full of change. She received a small scholarship from the NGO Thomas worked with, enough to cover her high school fees. She started attending a bigger school in town, where she met students from different backgrounds. Some were kind, others curious, but many couldn't believe she once lived beside a dump. "Is it true?" one girl asked her quietly. "You used to work there?" "Yes," Lena said, smiling. "That place taught me everything I know." The girl looked confused. "How can a dump teach you anything?" Lena thought for a moment. "It taught me how to find value in what others throw away. Not just things, but people too." Her words stayed with that girl long after, and eventually, others started to see Lena differently, not as someone to pity, but as someone to learn from. As months turned into years, Lena continued to shine in school. She joined science clubs, spoke at small community events, and helped younger children study after class. She also visited the dump often, bringing food and books for the kids still working there. Her mother's health, however, was slowly fading. Some days she couldn't speak much. Other days she smiled weakly and said, "You've made me proud, Lena. You've already given me more than I ever dreamed." Lena tried to stay strong, but the fear of losing her mother hung over her like a shadow. She wanted her to see her graduate, to see how far she'd come. One evening, while Lena was reviewing for her exams, her mother called her softly. "Come sit beside me." Lena set her books down and sat next to her on the small bed. Her mother took her hand. "You've done so much, Anak. No matter what happens, don't stop dreaming. The world needs people like you." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Don't say that, Mama. You'll get better." Her mother smiled faintly. "Maybe, but if I don't, promise me something. Promise you'll never be ashamed of where you came from." Lena nodded, tears falling down her cheeks. "I promise." A few weeks later, her mother passed away quietly in her sleep. The pain was deep, like a hole that would never fill. For days, Lena couldn't eat or study. She felt lost, alone, and angry at the world. But then one night, she opened her notebook and found something she had written months before. "Even in the dirtiest place, something beautiful can grow." She realized her mother was right. She couldn't stop now. The best way to honor her was to keep moving forward. When she returned to school, her teachers and classmates welcomed her with kindness. Thomas visited and said softly, "Your mother would be proud. You've already begun changing lives." And as Lena looked out the window that evening, at the world that once seemed so far away, she whispered, "I'm not done yet, Mama. This is just the beginning." Months passed after her mother's passing, but the sadness never really left Lena. Some days it felt lighter, like a shadow behind her. Other days it came crashing down, heavy, painful, and quiet. But she remembered her promise, never be ashamed of where you came from. So she carried that promise in her heart like a flame that would not die. Lena was 16 now, older but still with the same spark in her eyes. She lived in a small room near her school, paid for by the NGO that had supported her since childhood. Thomas checked in on her often, bringing food or school supplies. He had become like an uncle, someone she could always count on. Life wasn't easy. She still worked part-time at a local store after class to afford her meals. She still wore second-hand clothes and patched shoes. But when she looked at her reflection, she saw strength, not pity. She studied harder than ever, finishing high school with top honors. During her graduation, when her name was called, the whole crowd stood and clapped. Miss Clara cried, and Thomas could barely hold his tears. As Lena walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she looked up toward the sky and whispered, "This is for you, Mama." After graduation, she was offered a scholarship at a nearby university. It wasn't the most famous one, but it was enough. A chance to study environmental engineering. That word, engineering, felt powerful to her. It meant she could build, fix, and change things. It meant she could make the world better. At the university, life was different. Her classmates came from all over the country, some rich, some middle class, very few poor. She felt out of place at first. Many spoke fluent English, wore nice clothes, and talked about travel and technology. She didn't have much to say about those things. But she had stories, real ones, about what it meant to grow up in the middle of waste, to breathe smoke every day, and to see children play on piles of garbage. When she shared her background in one class presentation, the room fell silent. "No one chooses to be born beside trash," she said softly. "But we can choose to turn that trash into something useful, into something that helps others." The professor nodded slowly, visibly moved. From that day, her classmates saw her differently, not as the poor girl, but as someone with a story that mattered. In her second year, Lena joined a small research group studying waste management in poor areas. They visited communities where people lived near dumps, just like she once did. Seeing those children again, bare feet, tired eyes, searching through garbage, broke her heart. One little girl ran up to her and said, "8, why are you wearing a uniform?" "Don't you work here too?" Lena knelt down and smiled. "I used to, but now I study so I can help make this place better." The girl tilted her head. "Can I study too?" "Yes," Lena said firmly. "And one day I'll make sure you can." That moment stayed with her. It reminded her of herself years ago, small, hopeful, and unaware that destiny could rise even from a dump. Her research work grew. She began developing small, low-cost systems for waste recycling and water filtration, the same idea she had presented years earlier. This time she had real tools, real data, and support from her professors. In her final year, she designed a project that aimed to turn organic waste into compost for farming. She called it Soil of Hope. When she presented it at a national competition, the judges were amazed. "Where did you get this idea?" one asked. "From home," she said simply. "From the dump where I grew up." The crowd went silent for a moment, then erupted into applause. She won the competition. Her project received a grant, enough money to actually build a pilot program in her hometown. When Thomas heard the news, he laughed and cried at the same time. "Lena," he said, hugging her, "your mother must be dancing in heaven right now." Returning to her hometown after so many years felt strange. The dump was still there, though smaller now. Some parts had been cleared, but others remained the same. Piles of old waste, the same smell, the same smoke. The children who worked there looked just like she once did. When they saw her come with a small group of engineers and volunteers, they followed curiously. "Who's that lady?" one boy asked. "She's an engineer," another replied proudly. "She's here to clean the dump." Lena smiled and waved at them. "Not just clean it," she said. "We're going to make it live again." The group began setting up bins for sorting waste: plastic, metal, paper, and organic. They built compost pits and taught people how to turn leftover food and plant waste into fertilizer. Tomas helped organize local families while Lena taught the children how to collect safely. Slowly, something amazing happened. The dump started to change. The piles of trash became smaller. The smell lessened. And for the first time in years, green plants began to grow in the cleared spaces. Lena also started a small weekend school for the children. She taught them reading, math, and how to take care of their environment. The same way Miss Clara once believed in her, she now believed in them. One Saturday after class, one of the boys asked her, "Teacher Lena, why do you come back here?" "You already left this place." Lena smiled gently. "Because I didn't really leave," she said. "This place is part of me. It's where I found who I am. As the weeks turned into months, her project attracted attention. News reporters came to film her work. They called her the girl who found her future in the trash. At first, she felt shy about it. But when she saw the children smiling on camera, proud, hopeful, she realized that her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to all of them. Soon more support came. Local officials helped expand her program, turning part of the dump into a recycling center. People who once scavenged for survival now had safer jobs, sorting, collecting, and learning. And every time Lena saw one of them holding a clean bottle or a piece of paper, she thought of her mother. One evening after a long day of work, Lena sat by the edge of the dump watching the sunset. The sky burned orange just like when she was a child. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We did it, Mama. The dump isn't just a dump anymore." Thomas sat beside her, his eyes full of pride. "You've done something most people wouldn't even dream of, Lena." She smiled softly. "It's not about dreams anymore, Thomas. It's about purpose." That night she wrote in her old notebook, the same one she used when she first learned to write. "The dump didn't destroy me. It built me. It gave me strength, lessons, and a reason to fight. I thought it held only trash, but it held my destiny." For the first time in a long while, Lena felt at peace. She wasn't just a girl from the dump anymore. She was a woman who had turned pain into progress and loss into light. But her journey wasn't finished. Not yet. Bigger dreams were waiting, and she knew deep inside that she was ready for the next step. Years later, the dump no longer looked like the place Lena had grown up in. The black hills of trash had been replaced by organized piles for recycling, green patches of grass, and even small gardens planted by local families. The air smelled cleaner. Children laughed while helping their parents sort waste, and some of them now went to school every morning, just like Lena once dreamed of doing. But Lena hadn't stopped there. The success of her first project had given her a new vision, one much bigger than herself. She wanted to help not just one dump, not just one town, but many. So she founded her own small organization. She called it the Hope from Waste Foundation. Its mission was simple: to turn trash into opportunity, and to give children from poor areas access to education and clean living. The early days of the foundation were hard. Funding was small, and Lena still managed most things on her own. She worked long hours writing proposals, meeting with local leaders, and teaching on weekends. Sometimes she barely had enough money for transport, but she kept going. Every big change starts small, she often reminded herself. Thomas was still by her side, helping as much as he could. Though older now, he remained her mentor and friend. "You've done more than anyone expected," he often said proudly. "Your mother's dream lives through you." Lena smiled every time he said that. "It's not just her dream anymore," she replied. "It belongs to every child who thinks they don't have a future." As the foundation grew, more people began to notice her work. She was invited to speak at schools and community centers, sharing her story with students who had never imagined life beside a dump. When she told them about her childhood and the smell, the struggle, the broken tablet that changed everything, they listened in silence. "I didn't have much," she told them. "But I had hope, and hope is powerful. It can grow even in the dirtiest places." Her words inspired many. Donations began to come in. Volunteers joined. Within a few years, her foundation expanded to other towns. They built small classrooms near dumps, started recycling workshops, and taught people how to earn safely from waste without losing their dignity. Each time Lena visited a new site, she met children who reminded her of herself, curious, brave, and hungry for a chance. She would sit with them, listen to their stories, and tell them, "You are more than your surroundings. You have the right to dream." But one visit changed her in a special way. It was to a faraway village where families still lived directly beside a large landfill. When Lena arrived, the heat was strong and smoke rose from burning trash. As she walked around with local volunteers, she saw a little girl crouched near a pile of bottles, sorting them carefully into a bag. Lena stopped. The girl's small hands, the dirt on her cheeks, even the way she hummed quietly to herself. It was like looking into her own past. "What's your name?" Lena asked softly. "Rosa," the girl replied, smiling shyly. Lena crouched down. "Do you go to school, Rosa?" The girl shook her head. No, my mama says we don't have money. But I want to learn. I find books sometimes, Lena felt her heart tighten. Books from the trash? Yes, Rosa said proudly. I keep them under my bed. Tears filled Lena's eyes. She gently placed a hand on Rosa's shoulder. You remind me of someone I used to know, she said. Would you like to go to school? Rosa's face lit up. Really, I can? Lena smiled. Yes, we'll make it happen. That moment became the spark for one of her foundation's biggest programs. Books, Beyond Borders, which gave free education kits and scholarships to children living near dump sites. Soon, Rosa and many others began attending school. Lena often visited to see their progress, and every time she did, she saw pieces of her own journey in their smiles. One day, during a public event where her foundation was being honored for its community work, Lena stood before a large audience. She wore a simple white dress, elegant but humble just like her. Behind her was a photo of the dump as it used to be, and beside it, a photo of what it looked like now, clean, green, and alive. When it was her turn to speak, she looked at the crowd, local officials, volunteers, children, and families. She took a deep breath and began in her calm, steady voice. I used to live in a place where people thought nothing good could ever come from. Every morning I walked through piles of trash searching for bottles and cans. I thought that was my life forever. But the truth is that dump gave me something no one else could: perspective. The room was silent. It taught me that even the most broken things can have purpose. That the dirtiest places can still hold dreams, and that sometimes destiny hides where you least expect to find it. As she spoke, Thomas wiped tears from his eyes. When I was a child, Lena continued, I found a broken tablet in the trash. That piece of waste opened a world of learning for me. It changed my life. And today I want to tell every child out there, your beginnings don't define your future. You do. The audience stood and clapped. Some cried. Cameras flashed, but Lena wasn't thinking of fame or awards. She was thinking of her mother, of her smile, her words, and her belief that one day, Lena would change their world. Later that night, when the event was over and the lights were gone, Lena walked back toward the old dump site alone. The air was quiet. The stars shone above just like they did when she was little. She stood there for a long time, remembering. The broken bottles, the candlelight, the smell of smoke, the sound of her mother's voice. Then she smiled and whispered, We did it, Mama. The dump held more than trash. It held my destiny. The wind blew softly through the grass. Somewhere nearby she could hear children laughing, free, joyful, and full of hope. Lena knew her story wasn't over. There were still so many dumps, so many children, so many dreams waiting to be discovered. But now she had a path, and she had the power to light the way for others. And so she kept going. Every morning she woke up early, not to search for bottles, but to search for possibilities. She met with students, communities, and leaders, reminding them that change always begins with one small step, or one small girl with a big dream. Years later, when people spoke her name, they didn't call her the girl from the dump anymore. They called her Engineer Lena, the woman who turned trash into hope. And though the world saw her as a hero, Lena always knew the truth. She wasn't made by success. She was made by struggle. She didn't escape the dump. She transformed it. And in doing so, she taught the world a simple but powerful truth. No place is too dirty for dreams to grow. No life is too broken to start again. Because sometimes the place you think will destroy you is the very place that will shape your destiny. Lena never planned to become famous. She just wanted to help. But sometimes when your story comes from the heart, it travels further than you expect. A few months after the big community event, a journalist from another country reached out to her. He had seen the video of her speech online and it had gone viral, shared by thousands of people. The title read, The Girl Who Turned Garbage into Gold. At first, Lena didn't even know about it. She was too busy working with her team, training local mothers on how to make compost and eco-bricks from plastic waste. But one day, Thomas showed her the article on his phone. Look, he said, smiling. The world finally knows your story. Lena was quiet for a while, staring at the screen. It felt strange, seeing her name there, her photo, her words. But what touched her most were the comments. People from different countries were writing things like, She gives me hope. I grew up in a dump too, now I know I can change my life. She's living proof that dreams can come from anywhere. Lena's eyes filled with tears. If my story can give someone else courage, she whispered, then every hard day was worth it. Soon, invitations started coming. Universities wanted her to speak. Organizations wanted to partner with her foundation. She even received a letter from an international environmental group inviting her to share her work at a conference abroad. She couldn't believe it. Me, she said, laughing nervously. I don't even have a passport. Thomas chuckled. Well, it's time you get one. The process took weeks, but finally Lena boarded her first plane. As it lifted off the ground, she looked out the window, eyes wide with wonder. The world below seemed so small, tiny houses, tiny roads, and she thought about how big her journey had become. When she arrived at the conference, she felt out of place at first. People wore suits, spoke many languages, and discussed ideas she had only read about. But when it was her turn to speak, the room went silent again, just like it always did when she shared her story. I am not a scientist, she began. I am just a girl who grew up beside a mountain of trash. I didn't learn from books first, I learned from survival. But that survival taught me that the earth can heal and so can people. Her voice trembled slightly, but it was strong, honest, real. When I was little, I used to think the dump was my curse. Now I know it was my classroom. It taught me to find value in what others throw away. Not just objects, but people too. By the end, the audience stood and applauded. Many came up to her after, shaking her hand, asking about her foundation. Some even offered to support her projects in other countries. Lena left the conference with tears in her eyes and hope in her heart. The world was listening, and that meant change was possible. Over the next few years, the Hope from Waste Foundation expanded its reach. They opened branches in nearby countries, training volunteers and helping poor families learn to recycle, garden, and educate their children. Lena often traveled, speaking in schools and communities. But no matter how far she went, she never forgot her roots. Every few months she returned home, to the very place that had raised her. The dump looked almost unrecognizable now. Where once there were piles of black trash, there were now recycling centers, community gardens, and even a small library built from recycled wood. On its walls were painted words in bright colors. Hope lives here. One afternoon, as she walked through the site, a young man approached her shyly. Miss Lena? He said. I'm sorry to disturb you. She smiled warmly. Not at all. What's your name? Luis, he replied. I used to live here when I was small. You came once, years ago. You gave us books and helped my mother find work. Because of you, I finished school. I'm now studying environmental science. Lena's eyes softened. That's wonderful, Luis, he smiled proudly. I just wanted to thank you. You changed my life. Lena shook her head gently. No, Luis, you changed your life. I only showed you what was possible. Moments like that became her quiet joy, seeing how one act of kindness could ripple out into generations. But even with her growing success, Lena stayed grounded. She still lived simply, still helped pack food for volunteers, still listened to every child who came to her. One evening, after a long day, she sat outside her small office watching the sunset. The sky turned orange again, just like it did all those years ago when she was a child. She closed her eyes and remembered her mother, her laughter, her hands, her words. She whispered softly, Mama, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. As she sat there, Thomas joined her, his hair now silver but his smile still warm. You've come a long way, Lena, he said. Do you ever think about resting? Lena laughed gently. Sometimes. But then I see the children, and I know I can't stop yet. There's still so much to do. Thomas nodded. You've turned your pain into a map for others to follow. That's rare. Lena smiled thoughtfully. Pain taught me purpose. And purpose taught me peace. That night, she wrote another note in her old notebook, the one that had traveled with her through every stage of her life. Life has a strange way of leading us through the dirt before showing us the flowers. But every broken path can lead to something beautiful if you walk it with faith. A few months later, Lena received another letter, this time from a government official. The country planned to recognize her for her contributions to environmental reform and education. She would be awarded the National Service Medal, one of the highest honors for a citizen. When the day came, The hall was filled with people, leaders, teachers, children, and families she had helped over the years. As Lena stepped up to receive the medal, applause filled the room. But her eyes found only one thing: the crowd of children waving small paper flags, smiling at her. Those were her true rewards. After the ceremony, one reporter asked her, "Miss Lena, what drives you to keep going, even after achieving so much?" Lena smiled softly, looking straight into the camera. "Because I know what it feels like to be forgotten," she said, "and I never want another child to feel that way again." Her words spread across the country that night, and somewhere in a small house far away, a young girl sat watching the news with tears in her eyes. She looked around her messy room, cracked walls, dim light, and whispered, "If she can do it, maybe I can too." And that was how Lena's story continued, not through fame or fortune, but through the quiet hearts she touched. She had started in a dump, surrounded by what others called waste. But she ended up changing lives, proving that even from the lowest places, greatness can rise. Her journey was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who dared to believe that hope can grow anywhere, even in the dirt. And as Lena often said to her students, dreams don't care where you're born. They only care if you're brave enough to chase them. Years had passed. The dump that once smelled of smoke and rot now smelled of rain and new soil. Trees stood tall where trash once piled high, and butterflies danced where only flies used to buzz. Lena stood at the edge of the site one morning, her hands folded in front of her. The sun was rising, soft gold light spilling across the hills, and in that light the past didn't look painful anymore. It looked like proof that anything broken could still bloom. She was older now, in her 40s, with gentle lines around her eyes. But those lines told a story of laughter, struggle, and endless hope. Her hair had a few strands of silver, but she wore them proudly like streaks of wisdom. Behind her stood a group of young students, about 20 of them. They were the newest volunteers of her foundation, bright-eyed, eager, and full of questions. "Ma'am Lena," one of them asked, "is it true you used to live right here?" Lena smiled. "Yes, right over there," she said, pointing toward a grassy area. "There used to be a small hut made of scrap wood and tin. My mother and I lived in it. We collected bottles and cans to survive." The students looked amazed. One whispered, "It's hard to imagine this place was ever a dump." Lena nodded. "It was, but do you know what's harder to imagine? That I once believed I didn't belong anywhere else." She paused, looking around at the garden, the classrooms, and the recycling center. Children were playing nearby, laughing freely. "When I was your age," she continued, "I thought my future ended here. I didn't know life could be bigger. But it was the people who believed in me that made the difference. A teacher, a kind stranger, and a man who refused to give up on me. They showed me that hope doesn't need perfect beginnings." The group listened quietly, soaking in every word. After the talk, they followed her to the new training hall, a bright, airy building made of recycled materials. On one wall hung a large painting, a little girl standing in a dump reaching for the sky. Beneath it were the words, "Where you start doesn't decide where you'll finish." That mural had become the symbol of her foundation. Every visitor stopped to take a photo there. Every volunteer drew inspiration from it. Inside, the room was buzzing with activity. Mothers learned how to make crafts from plastic wrappers. Young men sorted recyclables for shipment. Children sat in a reading corner flipping through colorful books. Lena walked among them, greeting each one with a smile. She knew most of their names. Rosa, now in high school. Luis, who had graduated and returned as a mentor, and many others whose lives had been touched by her work. Thomas was no longer there. He had passed peacefully 2 years earlier. But his spirit lived on in everything she did. Sometimes she still caught herself looking toward the door, expecting him to walk in with his old cap and gentle grin. On his last day, he had told her, "Lena, I'm proud of you. You've turned your pain into light. Keep shining even when I'm gone." And she had. Later that afternoon, Lena sat under a tree near the old dump site, now a park, with her notebook in hand. The same old notebook that had followed her through every chapter of her life. Its pages were worn, some smudged, but still filled with dreams and gratitude. She began writing slowly, her handwriting a little shakier now, but still steady. "Today, I watched children run across the same ground where I once crawled through trash. The smell of smoke is gone. In its place is laughter. And I realized something. I didn't just find my destiny here. I built it, piece by piece, with the help of others who believed in me. She paused, looking at the horizon. The sky was clear, and for a moment it felt like time had folded, past and present meeting in the same heartbeat. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Rosa, the same little girl she once found sorting bottles years ago. She was now a young woman wearing a volunteer shirt and carrying a folder of papers. "Ma'am Lena," Rosa said, smiling. "We got approved. The new eco-school project, it's happening." Lena's face lit up. "Really?" Rosa nodded, eyes shining. "Yes. We'll start building next month. The first school made entirely of recycled materials." Lena stood and hugged her. "I'm so proud of you, Rosa. You're going to change even more lives." Rosa smiled shyly. "I just followed your example, ma'am. You showed me what's possible." Lena looked at her for a moment. This young woman who had once been a child in the dump, now leading a project of her own. It felt like watching a seed she'd planted years ago finally bloom. "That's the goal," Lena said softly. "Not to be the only one who shines, but to light others so they can shine too."